Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Wednesday, February 20th, 2013, and this is episode number 57.
In this episode, we're going to discuss blogging on Quora, direct response on Twitter, reporting on Vine activity, and much more. Good evening, Sir O'Brien. How are you doing?
I am doing well. How's it going, Adam?
Doing all right. I always feel like when I do the intro and I say digital marketing agency, like I bet you if you listen to some of the past episodes, I'm just kind of going da-ba-da-da-ba-da. Like, that's what it feels like when every time I say it, I feel like I mumble it a bit, sometimes a little bit more coherently than other times. I think this episode was fine. I think other shows potentially do their intros once and then continue to replay it. But, we want to sharpen our saw, so we just do it on the fly every single time, right?
There we go. 57th time we've gone through it, which at this point means it's 57 times better than it was when we started, so...
Considering that I'm sure that there's at least 2 times in there that I had to redo it, I guess 57, 59, something like that for me at least.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, exactly.
So what do we got going on this episode?
Well, I was going to start and see if you had a chance to catch the PlayStation 4 live stream announcement today.
I didn't know that it was actually happening that soon. I saw some buzz on Twitter about PlayStation 4 and today saw that it was one of the trending things, I think, afterwards. But it seemed, at least from what I saw, because I didn't dig that far, that there was a lot of unveiling of basically nothing.
Oh, it was 2 hours of trailers. It was terrible.
Really? Of games that they wanted to launch on it, huh?
Yeah, it was funny. They did the Apple intro video style of talking heads in front of a white background, and man, it was brutal. So many trailers. The only big reveal was the controller, and the controller had actually been leaked, and so it was just sort of them confirming that, yes, those pictures that you saw of our controller are, in fact, our controller. Though the one interesting thing, and the reason that I bring it up in the first place, is the controller for PlayStation 4 is actually going to have a dedicated share button right on the front.
Wow.
So we're not talking, buried in menus inside of the console itself. It is built into the controller. One click on the share button, you're going to be able to share screenshots. You're going to be able to share videos of your, conquests in game, that sort of thing. And then you can even share to kind of post status updates. So there's going to be certain games where, let's say you're running a little low on health, you click the share button, you send out kind of the equivalent of a in-game tweet that says, hey, any of my gamer friends that can help me out, I could really use a little bit of extra help on this level that I'm on or this boss that I'm fighting, that sort of thing, and then people can actually come to your rescue. So some interesting social implications coming out of PlayStation. I'd imagine Xbox also has some of that stuff in the works, but, definitely moving in the direction of more social when it comes to the world of gaming.
Well, to compete with what really is taking over the gaming industry, and I kind of did, I think, I don't remember if it was in the iPhone, not when the iPhone first came out, but when probably like version 2 or 3 was out there, the 3GS or something, I ended up I did a blog post on what is it called? I don't remember what the heck it was named, notebooks.com. And I said that these are the industries that the iPhone is going to eat away at in the future. And one of the things I said was in gaming, and you should have seen the comments. People were like, no way, that's not possibly going to happen. And it's like, well, if you think of gaming in the form that it is, that people, the hardcore gamers, Call of Duty and all those really, really high frame rate, really high resolution sort of games, and you think that that's the only type of games anybody will ever try to play, and that's the mass market right there, then yeah. But when you look at what's happened over the years since the 3GS with both tablets and smartphones, it really has eaten away a lot because of all the casual gamers that are out there, and the amount of people who are just buying these $3 games, $5 games at the most. I mean, a lot of them, even 99-cent games are $1 are free and monetized on top of them. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this new wave of gaming systems, which seems to be, happening this year, PS4, I think they're talking about I don't know if it's a true name, Xbox 720, and the Wii U is already launched. I don't remember how much they added in regards to social, but it's going to be interesting to see how they compete with an almost natively social platform of mobile gaming.
Yeah, and one thing that you probably won't be able to do with the share button is create a Vine. They may have been a little too late to the party to get included. I'm imagining you'll be able to, send out a quick Facebook status update, a nice little tweet, but Vine usage is actually something we wanted to dive into for our stat of the week. And so it's actually a two-parter here. We are going to talk about some initial numbers coming out of Vine usage, and then in the end of the episode, we're going to look at how you can learn a little bit more about your own Vine usage. But the interesting stat that came out, it was posted by a company called Simply Measured. Simply Measured is a social media analytics tool, and they looked at Vine videos being shared onto Twitter, and they found that over a recent 48-hour period, over 110,000 Vine clips were posted to Twitter. So I think that kind of lends some credibility to the idea that being backed by Twitter definitely helps you to get a little bit of legitimacy, get people to check it out. I know in my own, when I load up the account and view all of the people that I'm connected to on Twitter that have Vine, the first day it came out, there was, a handful, maybe 10 people. Now I can scroll and scroll and scroll, and it's hundreds of people that I follow on Twitter also have Vine. So it definitely feels like some growth there. And I've been playing around with it a little bit, trying to make some Vines, just get used to it, experiment, kind of share, that sort of thing. What about yourself, Adam? Have you had a chance to play around, make some fun Vine videos?
Yeah, I think we were talking about it a little bit before the show, where I kind of forget, when I think of something like tweeting or posting on Facebook or shooting a photo for Instagram or any other photo kind of based network, that stuff kind of comes quickly. You just capture. But when it comes to the Vine dynamic, you have to kind of think it through a little bit. And sometimes you don't really think about it right at the right moment, and the time has passed and the opportunity has passed. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of folks who are successfully using Vine, both brands and individuals who seem to be pretty popular on the network. It's using it in a more scripted fashion. So you can tell it's stuff that they could do over and over and over again if they screw up the very first time. And they're not capturing something as it's happening right in the moment. And whether that is the kind of predominant, most popular and most, quote unquote, viral approach, or whether using it for something like news, which was, I think, within 48 hours after it happening, some chopper in Los Angeles or no, maybe Miami or something. I don't remember what it was, but someplace close to water, they shot a video of a harbor dolphin. It must have been on the East Coast, that had got stuck in the harbor, and they had, crews out there helping the dolphin, and they ended up creating this little 6-second Vine, and actually didn't even have the graphic for their place or anything, because they can't add lower thirds or anything like that on Vine, but ended up putting it on Twitter, and it got some press because it was the first Vine used for the for newscast. Not sure if anybody's used it beyond that. What do you think about the scripted versus, spontaneous?
Yeah, it's definitely, spontaneous works if you just want to capture 6 seconds. Like, you want to hold the button, capture your 6 seconds, share that. I think if you want to put together a little story, doing it spontaneous is hard because you have one shot at it. And the trick with 6 seconds is it goes by really fast. That's one of the things I'm discovering is, you hold that button and you watch that scroll bar tick by to count your 6 seconds off, and it goes really quickly. And so I made one where I was kind of documenting my morning coffee routine. And the first time I went at it, I was like 2 steps into a 6-step process, and my entire 6 seconds was done. And I was like, well, that didn't work. And so I had to kind of like put everything back in its place and then redo the whole thing. And so, in that case, it worked because it was semi-scripted and I can just redo my morning ritual. But had I tried to capture a moment, maybe, I miss a shot or something like that and the whole thing's gone. So it is a little tricky. I'd imagine a couple months down the road, they'll have more advanced editing features. But for now, it's still an early network. People are still figuring out, but that's kind of why I like it. There's opportunity to figure it out along with everyone and be one of the leaders in the space. So that actually segues nicely into our main topic for today. Speaking of being leaders in a new and as yet uncharted space, Quora, the famous question and answer website, recently introduced a new feature that really opens up the network to some interesting possibilities. And what they've added is the ability to blog inside of Quora. You may be thinking to yourself, how do I blog inside of a Q&A answer site? Well, that's a good question because it is kind of an odd combination. But basically what they allow you to do is set up an account, and instead of responding to a specific question, you can write a blog post about a specific topic. And then that blog post gets added into any searches or any people following that topic, and they'll automatically see that as if it was an answer to a question. You just don't have to have the question there in the first place in order to participate. So thought this was interesting. I thought it might be something brands would consider. And, Adam, you brought up that we could also use this as an opportunity just to talk about a variety of third-party hosted blogging solutions. You've got Tumblr, you've got Quora now, there's Blogger, WordPress.com, there's a new site called Medium that's out there. All these are sort of enabling both individuals and companies to do the actions generally associated with blogging without having to do things like set up a site, manage a site, and in some cases even market the site. They kind of take over the marketing for you. So I figured I'd kick this one off and, we could just discuss the idea of third-party blogging and see if it's something brands should consider or if there are risks that may outweigh the rewards. So what's your take on it?
I want to ask you first a question in regards to Quora, and as you mentioned, it was founded as a Q&A site, a question and answer site, and I think it did a pretty good job of it. Just at first blush, what do you feel about it introducing introducing this full-fledged long-form blogging feature into that kind of pure question and answer environment that it had previously?
It made me a little worried, actually. It made me think that maybe the speed with which new answers were getting submitted, the amount of traffic to Quora, all of that was starting to die down a little bit. And so this was their play to increase that traffic again, to continue building the site. They are a startup. They're trying to get more users, more revenue, bigger profit margins, that sort of thing. So I was like, adding blogs, that doesn't really feel like a fit. I think the way they went about it is strong. So if you're an active Quora user, you can actually follow specific topics. Let's say I was interested in all things iPhone. I could subscribe to the iPhone topic. And previously what that would do is when somebody posted a new question or somebody answered a question that related to iPhone, that would pop up into my feed. And so now what they're trying to do is say, okay, well, answers to questions were interesting, but there's also people that maybe just have interesting blogging thoughts and interesting general thoughts about the iPhone. They can share those, and that will filter into the network as well. And, it's a little bit of like a Wikipedia type thing. Quora is well known for having influential voices and people that don't often share in other channels. So maybe we can get those people to share a little more content this way. So, it is a useful integration, but at the same time, it does make me wonder, is this sort of them grasping at any additional traffic they can get a hold of, even if it dilutes the focus of the site a little bit?
For me, I really like the dynamic that they were building for the question and answer, and I think that's what differentiated them. And so, if we make sure that we also include the marketing slant on this, right? Having question and answer provides an opportunity for you to become a subject matter expert if you're an entrepreneur, for one thing. Also for it to be in much shorter form. So the pressure to potentially write something longer, not that there's pressure just suddenly because there's a blog option now, but the ability for it to be kind of in more bite-sized chunks. The information itself is also structured a little bit different, among other things. It's a real big kind of SEO play where if you look at what's the site that pops up the most when you end up searching for information on the web, it's almost always, if you're looking for general topics, it's almost always Wikipedia, right? Yeah. If you're looking for shopping, it ends up being usually Amazon. If you end up looking for location-based stuff, if you're using Google, it's likely Google Maps. Movies, IMDb. So there's usually, but Wikipedia is by far usually the most general top site that always pops up. And so Quora, in a way, was making a play for that. in a different format. I honestly haven't been as heavy of a user in the last year of Quora as I kind of was early on, just kind of looking at things. And so I can't say how they've adjusted their mechanism of voting things up and down and kind of the community based rewards that they've provided, the system reward system that they've set up for folks. But it seems to me it's a little bit of polluting that system when you go and you add long form blogs, and those long form blogs aren't necessarily about answering questions. They're about whatever you want them to be. So the purity of those blog posts are not as, say, kind of regulated as they could be when you do these short form responses that are kind of awarded or not awarded, buried even from folks who are looking at it when it's in response to a particular question that somebody has. I see what they're doing, because when it comes to, they're saying we have a built-in audience. If you just want to write about a topic, come over here and write. It's turnkey. You just go ahead and go for it. And use this as your blogging platform, because as long as you tag your content properly, or you say that it's a part of a particular category, we will pipe that out to those who say that they're interested in that. So they've taken all of that information that they've put together from the previous experience of people like myself who have said, I'm interested in technology. I'm interested in digital marketing. I'm interested in movies. I'm interested in television, whatever it is. And suddenly now I might have long form content coming from people, and there could be people who are happy about that, and some people who maybe it wasn't unexpected. So I see how they're trying to market it. I just still trying to figure out one of the things they said in their description of this was, if you have content already, come over here and repost it. And that could be an interesting SEO play, and it could be an interesting reach play in regards to reaching a lot of folks who you haven't been able to reach with your current blog. But it's obviously going to lack the brand, the experience, and tie back that a native blog post that's on your blog, on your corporate site, would be linked to. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, I think, SEO, you mentioned SEO, that's definitely something that I had considered. So Quora does often rank pretty well inside of Google searches for certain topics. And so it's kind of it could be a backdoor into some SEO benefits. It's not going to drive SEO benefits for your website, but it could for at least your general brand. So blogging inside of Quora, you're piggybacking on the SEO kind of page rank that Quora has naturally. So there are some benefits there. And, Quora, they did share some numbers, and they are pretty impressive. They said active writers on Quora are averaging 30,000 plus monthly views, which brings you to 350,000 plus annual views. Those are not small numbers. Those are respectable numbers. I think, though, so the tricky part is it's going to be advantageous if you don't already have a big blog. If you are a up-and-comer, you don't have an audience, you can put something on Quora and it will get discovered by people following those topics and people that are interested in those topics. So you're letting Quora do the work for you to find a interested and relevant audience, which is good. But then if you start to build up that audience, there's no easy way to take it onto a channel that you own. So if you're just an individual and you're trying to build up your personal profile, that's fine. But if you're a company and suddenly you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, 350,000 people a year are looking at me, but they're looking at me inside of Quora, and I want them on my own website, or I can do things like potentially sell to them or sign them up for a newsletter or link them to my other social channels. You're giving up that control in exchange for building the audience. So it is a bit of a trade-off. It reminded me a lot of a network called Medium. I mentioned that. So Medium, again, it's basically blogging on Quora without the Q&A part. So Quora started with Q&A, Medium started with blogging, and then Quora said, oh, well, that looks kind of interesting. Maybe we do that too. So Medium, instead of setting up a blog, you just create a post and submit that into a topic. So if I wanted to write about the iPhone, I'd write a post about the iPhone and submit that into kind of a group of iPhone articles. People that want to read about the iPhone, they then subscribe to that and they'd automatically see that. So again, it's doing the work of finding your audience, but you don't have control. There isn't, as good of a central archive to go and find all of your posts. So advantages to it, definitely some disadvantages. I think, if I was to make a recommendation, I would say if you're a smaller company, give it a shot and try to, use it to leverage some additional audience and use it to get your name out there a little bit. But if you do start to see a good response, transition over into your owned channel and, have a little more control over that audience and what you can do with them and how much control you have over the type of content that they see. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with it. I'm looking at, for instance, just a post. It's really difficult, at least initially. And again, this might be because I'm not digging around properly and looking at how they've set it up. But it's a little difficult to find a particular blog post, and because it is mixed in with the questions and things that are in there. There's topics, which is essentially covering everything under that topic as you type, and then there's results that could end up just simply being questions, and then there's what they call blogs or blog posts. And so far, it's been hard to kind of find a blog post in the mix of everything else. I found one here, which definitely looks like they have the upvoting mechanism on here, which I would imagine would help a particular thing trend. So they have trending topics on Quora. So it says, like, for instance, this one, how to master your time, 2,367 upvotes. It says 51,000 people have viewed this particular post, which is a huge amount of people. Now, whether or not this individual is, an A-lister blogger that brought their community there, whether they were featured by Quora in the initial launch of the blog thing and therefore kind of were seen more, which we see happen on a lot of other networks that are trying to kind of seed their content first so that people can check out the new features that they offer, or what, I'm not sure. It even says that there's over 58 comments and then there's 50 shares. So there's some different dynamics that are happening here, and they've posted it into, what looks to be here, a dozen and a half different topics, which would extend the reach. And that kind of reminds me very much of, another third-party blogging platform like Tumblr, which runs off of tags to kind of extend where the audience finds your content, right?
Yeah. I think the one advantage, though, to something like, I'm going to bucket together Tumblr, Blogger, and WordPress, is that you do have some control over both the appearance of your content and the website, which is important. So you can have a Tumblr blog that would be hosted under something like CoreyO'BrienTumblrblog.com. It doesn't have to be tumblr.com/CoreyO'Brien. So it could be its own domain name. It could look very different and unique from the other Tumblr websites. But then, like you said, you can tag things, and somebody following that tag could also discover the content. So Tumblr is kind of the best of both worlds. And WordPress.com, which is the self-hosted, WordPress.com, which is the group-hosted service. So not the one where you install it onto your own server, but the one where WordPress actually hosts it for you, does something similar. You kind of submit your content. They help bring the audience to you, but ultimately you can have more control. You can give it your own domain name, you can give it your own design, and then for a lot of these, at the end of the day, if you really want to, you can export your content and put it into a different platform entirely. So I think that those are probably a little different. They are hosted by someone else, and there is a little bit of control retained by that company, but I think that with the WordPress.com, with the Tumblr, you do have a lot more opportunity to really own that audience in a way that you don't see on something like Quora or Medium.
Yeah, I agree. And in integrating it with other dynamic things with your site, so tying other pieces of what you have going on with your site. Your blog is a great way to add more authority to your domain for SEO, right? And so if you're just a blogger and that's all you care about is just having your blog and that's it, that might be a different story. But if you are a company, a brand, and you're trying to leverage your blog, then there's definitely a difference in the value that having your own platform can bring. You could also think about using these other platforms as discovery channels. So certain types of content ends up flying really, really well on the other networks. For instance, Tumblr, GIFs and things like that, things that tend to be a little bit more fun and viral-y, the things that people would associate with viral stuff. So videos that have humor or that stand out and are a little unusual, those sorts of things that you very quickly can kind of repost, become very popular. If you look at Tumblr, Good Morning America is on Tumblr, for instance. I think or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's Today's Show, the other morning show. And they put a lot of things that are actually like video clips that are entertaining and looping animated GIFs of things that happen at their place, or still images, because they know that Tumblr has kind of this more viral feel to it. And it doesn't get a ton of engagement from when I reviewed it, but it gets a little bit of engagement. Whereas if you were to have something like that on your corporate blog, it might not be as appropriate per se to have that, or it might just not have the same sort of reshare effect because your blog stands on its own. What do you think of like using the Quora blog as a way to repost some of your content and see what kind of reach you might get, or see what kind of reaction you might get with the intention of discovery? You're putting it out there to see if you might actually be able to attract an audience that hasn't been introduced to your brand before.
Yeah, I always think that's a little weird. I'm not a big proponent of multi-posting content. I think design your content for the channel and the audience that it's going into, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I think that if it's going to be on your website or it's going to be on your blog, that's kind of it. And if you're doing something for Quora, write something specifically for Quora. Write something that you think the Quora audience would respond well to. Look at other Quora blogs, see what the prevalent formatting, what the prevalent length is, that sort of thing. I think it's a little weird to write something and then cross-post it on Quora and have two pieces of content out there. I know that that's potentially damaging to your Google search results. If Google sees, okay, well, this content is on Quora, it's also on this other site. Well, we know and trust Quora, so we're actually going to ding the other site because it looks like they're stealing content from Quora. So there could be some potential harm there. So I'm going to say no on that. But, if you disagree, I would be interested to hear your take on it.
That really would be the same reason why I would worry is the duplicate content thing. And I've been kind of doing a little research lately and hearing a few folks talking about the duplicate content, if on the same site, is what really is where you get penalized, and being on different sites, you're less likely to get really penalized. And the example that I've seen used in that instance has been the Huffington Post, where content has been duplicated from other sources for whatever reason, and that it's been perfectly fine. I don't think that's a great example. It doesn't completely give me enough confidence to say that that's proof that duplicate content will not get dinged unless it's on the same site, because in my mind, Huffington Post has such powerful SEO that it could just be kind of in a league of its own in comparison to any other person's site or a much, much smaller brand. It likely has one of the highest page ranks for most of its stories, and its domain overall is very, very well known. So, I mean, I think if we could disprove that there was any problem with putting duplicate content on more than one site, I'm not necessarily still a proponent, because I think if you have great content, you want the great content to be on your own domain, because that's where you want the search to be pointing, and the shares, the links, the social shares to be going to. But you could take something that you have and maybe modify the content a little bit, just as a experiment to keep from having to rewrite content specifically for Quora, and put it up there and test it out. Other than that, I still am not 100% convinced that Quora is a place that you should be, spending a lot of your time blogging, unless you are maybe just kind of an enthusiast about a particular topic, or somebody personally who happens to be an expert in a topic, but a brand, not very likely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say don't try to set up your entire blog on Quora. By all means, make a single post, make a couple of posts, put it up there just as a way of extending your brand into this new channel. And hey, maybe you write the next post that gets 60,000 views, and that's great. But I wouldn't put a lot of effort into this. But I do also at the same time think it's interesting, and especially, like I said, for smaller sites, for smaller companies, give it a try and see what happens. And maybe you find an audience there, and they discover your brand in a way that they wouldn't have if they had to stumble upon your blog via a Google search or something like that. But if you're a larger site, if you're looking to just kind of form a blogging strategy as a whole, I would say Quora's blogging is probably not the answer to your problem. So worth checking out.
Would you say if you were an author, would you say if you're an aspiring, I guess author or thought leader or entrepreneur, Quora would probably be a good alternative?
Yeah, I think if you're a individual, it's even more tempting to write some content there. Because like I said, at that point, you're just trying to build up your own name. And so if your Quora name is your name, problem solved there. If I wrote something, people are seeing, okay, this Corey O'Brien seems to know what he's talking about when he talks about podcasting or social media, that sort of thing. It's building up my own reputation. So if you're an individual, by all means, I think this is definitely worth checking out. I think if you're a company, there's some more things that you should be considering.
So what do we got up next here?
Up next is the lightning round. All right, so we got 3 lightning round stories, the very classic lightning round formula. I like it. First one is looking at Twitter launching, or sort of, at least sneak previewing a new feature. So Adam, is this one you want to take a crack at first, or you want me to dive in?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it.
All right, 60 seconds on the clock. Let us know what Twitter is working on. Ready, and go.
So Twitter, in their Twitter ads account, previewed something that it's basically like a direct response ad. It's almost like a landing page in a way on Twitter where they have a tweet. It's got a link in it like others do, and then it brings it to this landing page with a unique ID on it. That's basically saying, if you're interested in this information, go ahead and click this button, says get it now. And it shows this is the information that you'll be passing off to them, which essentially is profile information. It's your real name, your email, and your Twitter name to whomever it is that's running this particular ad. And that initially is just Twitter, but this could be used as kind of a lead generation tool on Twitter for any sort of business that's looking to say, look, if you're interested in this particular document or getting more information, just click this and it'll send us all this information at once.
All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go. So I thought this was interesting, though, I was like, is this just something they're testing out to get initial response? Because it felt a little clunky. There's just a lot going on. There's sort of this header thing. There's some text. It's showing you your own information, which is trying to say, hey, here's what we're going to share. But at the same time, I'm like, why am I looking at myself here? There's a button that says get it now, which I guess they then send you a link that you then have to click on, and you fill out another form to give more information, and then you can download the guide. So there's a lot of steps. It's definitely a little confusing. It's also, it's kind of using the Twitter card functionality, but one thing that's interesting is you don't even see the offer if you're not logged into Twitter. So if you're not logged in, all you see is a link. It doesn't actually show the offer and the whole process that you would need to go to. So that part's a little funky. I think fundamentally I like it. I just think that there's a lot of details that still need to be worked out.
So to jump on that real quick, Corey, I just clicked it. It says, thanks. Twitter advertising will be reaching out to you shortly or something like that. And then in my email, I got an email that says, thank you for requesting the Twitter Small Business Guide with a download link for their, PDF version of their business guide.
Ah, interesting.
So the experience, it looks like it's unpolished, just as you said, but I think it's ideal for people who have digital materials that they're trying to spread to get leads. And of course, you're trading off that profile data that you have to those individuals, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right, 60 seconds back on the clock for story number 2. Ready and go. So this is the update, the long overdue update to Highlight. I think that's, Highlight 2.5, something like that. Basically what they've done is, Highlight is really the original entrant into the social, local, mobile world of introducing yourself to new people. So you can use this app. It shows you what other Highlight users are around you. It definitely had a breakout during South by Southwest. A lot of people were talking about it. Since then, I think it fell off a little bit. It wasn't kind of the hot thing that grabbed people and said, hey, you need to be using this and sustain that momentum. But, South by Southwest right around the corner, they're giving another shot at it. So The update allows the ability to share photos and events with people around you, especially useful for something like South by Southwest. So I think worth paying attention to, though, I still think that outside of a big event like that, its utility is limited. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What is your take on highlight updates? Ready and go.
So with a couple things, you read my mind. I mean, the inclusion of this sort of proximity-based photos and events, the photos thing really reminded me of Color, another app that was trying to do that sort of proximity-based photo sharing where one person next to you might share a photo and not know you, but when you're using the app at the same time, you end up seeing it on your app when you open it up, and it just didn't work. It was a huge failure. Again, like you said, it may work at South by Southwest because of that environment. It may not work elsewhere. And so what once felt a little bit more like a kind of an assisted serendipity app of just kind of meeting people and highlighting people is feeling like it's trying to be, I guess you'd say almost like a social party app at the same time. So it's almost like you've got the app for the folks you don't know, and then the app for the folks that you really know and you're out hanging out with. We'll see how this plays out after South by Southwest finishes.
There it is. I had the volume turned down, the lightning round buzzer. Couldn't hear it. Now it is back and better than ever before. All right, with the volume issue adjusted, let's dive into story number 3. Ready and go. So Tesla, the car company, is in a little bit of a spat with the New York Times. The New York Times took one of their Teslas out for a long-distance test ride and had some issues with it. They said they ran out of juice, they were having trouble with the speed sensors, and they were having to turn the heater off to try to maintain battery life, and that, they made it to their destination, but they were freezing, and, when you buy an $80,000 Tesla, that's not exactly what you want to hear. But it turns out that might not be the whole story. Tesla actually came back with data that they recorded from that test drive car and said, some of these things aren't lining up with what you wrote in the story. But what's interesting about this is not that Tesla, had this data in the first place, but the fact that they were actually able to counter a site as big as the New York Times, because they too have a big blog and a highly followed Twitter account. Basically, Tesla is acting as a media company, and because they had done the work to build that audience, was able to respond to the New York Times. All right, Adam, what's your take on that? Do you think that, this was just a case of Tesla being lucky and people interested in the story, or did their blog and their Twitter account pay off when it came time to maybe refute some bad stories that had come out about their company? Ready and go.
So it's really interesting to see how they use their own channels to reach out around this story. I think it's also super interesting to see like data, if you believe it, can't be really refuted very much, right? So they're saying like, this is all the things you said. Here's the data that we have that shows otherwise, and you don't always have that luxury to have that data available. But when you do, I guess you've got the decision to make whether or not you want to make it public. And so the press jumped on the story after the story in a way, and so did a lot of the folks on Twitter. So it's an interesting use of using own to kind of combat potentially bad press, and maybe even in a way answer and respond to good press as well in the future.
All right, with 7 seconds to go, you will save us from the lightning round sound. Well, the last thing we wanted to cover today, it's something that we hinted at the start of the episode, but Simply Measured has a new Vine analytics tool. So part of the reason they shared the 110,000 Vine clips over 48 hours is that they are starting to track pretty much all Vine shares that are getting posted to Twitter. And as a result, you can now run a report against your own Twitter name to see how effective the Vine content that you're sharing is at actually generating a response. So I thought this was really interesting, and it's why we're including it as our, go-to, it's our action item of the week, running one of these Vine reports and seeing how that content is performing. So we'll include a link to the Simply Measured Vine report, but wanted to run through some of the stats and some of the type of information that it shares. So one thing that's nice is they do include a sample, and this is actually for Chris Brogan. Chris Brogan being the well-known social media writer, marketer, kind of thought person extraordinaire. And so what it does, and one of the unique limitations to it is that because Vine doesn't have an API, they're only able to examine things that are shared publicly. And so they're basically scraping your Twitter account to examine all of the Vine links that are shared. So for myself, I've shared a couple Vines, but because I don't actually put those onto Twitter, I can't run this own report against my own account. But looking at the Chris Brogan account, you can see a sample of the type of data that would be available for companies that are more active on Vine. So it is interesting. Looking at Chris Brogan, he shared 19 Vines that were tweeted over the last week. He has an average of 2.4 Vines per day, and 79 unique people interacted with those Vines for a total of 89 engagements. So that includes retweets and replies, which means that some people did both. They both responded to and retweeted a tweet that contained a Vine link. And from those 89 engagements, that actually represents 369,000 potential reach, or 4.7 million potential impressions. So you can see the definite cone of influence, starting from the users to the engagement to the reach to the impressions, which could be very valuable data to a company that is trying to figure out, okay, we've put these Vines out there. What does that mean to us in terms of potential impressions? The other thing that's really neat is it compares your Vines to other media. So this is something that we've seen a lot of people talking about in Facebook where, hey, photos are better or videos are better or text updates are better. Simply Measured is actually looking at, are Vines better than something like an Instagram link, a YouTube video, a photo, or just a general link? So in Chris Brogan's case, his engagement on a Vine video isn't quite as good as when he shares an Instagram photo, but is actually better than when he shares a YouTube link. And so you can kind of get a sense for, okay, what is his audience responding to? And I think this is definitely going to change depending on your own account. So if you're an account that's done a lot of YouTube video, you're known for creating great video content, you're probably going to have much higher response numbers on your YouTube links than on your Instagram links. And that can give you a sense for, okay, maybe I should keep producing this content because this is what my audience has come to expect from me, or maybe I should look at something else because despite the fact that I share a lot of Instagram links, nobody seems to actually be clicking on them. They also include things like Vine influencers by clout score, so it shows of the people that are interacting with you who has the highest clout score. Vine addicts by tweets, it's who is most engaged with your Vine content. They even break down engagement by city and country. So a lot of interesting data, a lot of things that are kind of fun to poke around with. It's still early for a lot of this, so the numbers might be a little lower, which is probably good to start tracking it now, and that way you can see growth over time. You can really get a sense for areas that you could improve upon, because I think that there is sort of a wave you can ride right now when it comes to Vine of being an early account, getting in there, growing that audience early as the network itself continues to grow. So I think this is definitely worth checking out, with the caveat being that you do need to have posted at least a handful of Vine videos to Twitter in order to get any sort of data back out.
In the last 7 days, actually, because I tried to do it and I haven't really tweeted. I've probably sent 1 or 2 Vines in the last 7 days, and it says must post 3 Vines in the last 7 days.
Interesting. It may also be a restriction of their free report. So they do have a paid report. The free report is limited to 100,000 followers or less. So if you have a big account, you actually can't run this. But they may be able to get some of that data for the paid accounts. But the free account, you're gonna have to be a active Vine user. But if you're not an active Vine user, then you probably don't need to pay attention to these stats anyway. So it's sort of, it's a bit of a catch-22. But I think, by all means, maybe take a week and be like, this is the week I'm going to go all in on Vine. I'm going to shoot 1 a day. I'm going to share it onto Twitter. I'm going to see what happens. And then at the end of the week, you run this report and you say, okay, did it work? Did people respond to it? Or should I stick with, the links and the Instagram photos that I've been sharing because I know that content does work?
Hey, and the alternative thing to do as well is there is no authorizing of Twitter to do it. You're just basically tossing in a username. So go ahead and toss in some of the other active folks and see what kind of numbers you're getting. Look at General Electric. Look at I'm trying to remember some of the other guys that are on there that are pretty popular. But take a look and see, are they really getting the sort of activity that you beyond Vine that you might like for your Vine videos as well. And so you could use it that way.
Yeah, you do have to be a little careful because I was like, oh, I could totally, spy on some other companies. I was like, who would make cool Vine videos? Let's try Red Bull. And it was like, Red Bull is way above the 100,000 limit. So if you just want to play around, you do have to be a little careful with finding an account that is below that 100,000 limit. But, don't think of huge corporations. You got to think of the smaller mom and pop shops. But there should be plenty of accounts that you can plug in to at least see how their content is doing and what the response rate seems to be.
Yep.
All right. Well, we covered a lot today, and as always, there's a lot of great stuff to be thinking about over the coming week. But that said, we would love to be a part of that ongoing discussion. So if you would like to get in touch, whether it's to ask us a question, suggest a topic, give us feedback, or even if you just want to say hi, we highly encourage that. And there is a number of ways to reach us. The first and easiest is to reach us via Twitter. We are both available at SoLoMo Show, or I can be reached directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. We can also be reached via email for whatever reason you want. And that is SoLoMoshow at SoLoMoshow@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page where we share things that we discover throughout the week in between shows. We have a Google Plus page and a Pinterest account, so you can check out some of the YouTube video versions of our show on there and repin them to your heart's delight.
There we go. And all of the links that we just discussed, as well as the links to the stories that we covered today, can be found in the show notes. And those are viewable both at solomoshow.com and in your podcast player of choice. There should be an option to view show notes. Definitely check those out. We put a lot of stuff in there. We oftentimes include supplementary links to expand the research you can do into some of the topics that we cover. And, even the things that we do cover, we often don't get to cover everything about it. So it's worth checking out the show notes, clicking through to some of those stories, giving it a little bit of a deeper dive, and especially things like the Simply Measured Vine report that we just talked about. The easiest way to do that is to just click into the show notes. You'll see a link that'll take you right there.
Why go hunting for what we've talked about when we give it there right to you, right?
Exactly. We will bring it right to your doorstep. You just got to eat it. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap. And we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.